Welcome to another episode of Agency Exposed. Ken, Brad, how are you this morning?
We're
Doing
good. I think we're
awesome.
about a mile away from each other and still on Zoom.
I know we're getting. Here's the fact: the pandemic has made us lazy. We don't even want
I
to get
think
out.
that's happening for sure.
The last week has made us lazy for sure.
We also record these at the crack of dawn.
Yeah. Here in Tennessee, depending on when you listen to this, we've had a snowpocalypse. So, Brad, you're from the north. Oh, Ken, you are too. So, was this legitimately bad, or what was your estimation of the past week?
Brad wasn't
Well,
here. Brad
yeah,
Oh,
this
you're
was
was
right.
this
in
does
Colorado.
reminds me of growing up in Detroit. This is the kind of weather we had, maybe minus the ice storms. But actually, I was in Colorado, so we got 20 inches of snow while I was there. But you
Whoa.
didn't hardly notice it because there's already 2 feet of snow on the ground. So it was interesting to come back to Nashville. Our flight was canceled for 2 days, so we just sat and made lemonade out of lemons and did another day of snowboarding. So can't go wrong
Fantastic.
there. Yeah, you can't go wrong there.
Yeah, I mean, in the South, like they cancel school for I don't know, like a hint of snow. Even worse than that. Um,
Ken,
so
let's be
yeah.
honest. Did you get stuck at all this past week?
No,
Anywhere?
I didn't. I have a Jeep.
Really?
I get
I got
around. That
snuck. I
thing
got
goes
stuck
anywhere.
once, and what I learned was this, and you guys should have told me, is if you're going to drive a two-wheel drive car, try to get the
Mm.
lightest version of a two-wheel drive car, not the
Mm.
heaviest version of a two-wheel drive car, because that doesn't work real good in ice. So I took my wife's bigger car out when I had been driving around a little bit in mine, which is a smaller two-wheel drive car. And I got a little dicey at times, but I made it. And then I said, we're going to go out. I'm going to be safe. I'm going to take her with me. So we got her bigger two-wheel drive SUV. Not a good idea.
The
Mm.
truth is like they don't put salt down or anything down here. So like there's ice and snow and ice and snow. There's just 4 inches between, you and the concrete. And so you do need a four-wheel drive to drive on this stuff. I see, Bob, that's a Southern mistake. You're from the deep South originally, right? And now Nashville. So
This is the
you'd
north for
never
me.
go out in a two-wheel drive car
Mm.
with those conditions. See,
Oh, well. Well, that's a great segue into today's topic, which we're going to continue a little bit off of our last episode of how to think right and properly and or better um, about your business, about your life, about the future. We have talked a lot, guys, over the past year of what the pandemic's going to mean for business, what the future, and just being future forward with your agency, I think is always important as service people who offer services to our clients. We've got to be, they pay us for our expertise. They pay us for keeping them current. They pay us for bringing customers in, which, you've got to be ahead of the curve in order to get in front of customers. So how do you stay sharp? Time goes by. I've kind of half jokingly said the young bucks come up and they do it better, cheaper, faster. How do you stay relevant? I know for me, as I continue to go on in my years, I continue to stay excited about technology, but I also know too, there's no way that I can be an expert in everything, nor should I be. But as agency owners, as those who work in agencies, how do we have the correct type of thinking, both for our personal lives and for our business life, that keeps us sharp, that keeps us ahead of the curve, and keeps us productive and in demand from our client? So I know that's a big topic, but wanted to dive into that before we do get into specifics. Neither one of you guys want to have
well,
anything to say on that?
well, I just to connect the dots too, like that we have all this uncertainty with platforms and things like that, which we've talked about in several episodes. And I think I think that's a new trend or a season that we're going into. So I don't think that, I think there's a lot to unpack about how you operate in an environment where you can't, um, you don't have a lot of confidence or certainty in some of the critical tools that you might use, or there's a possibility that that some of those things don't have absolute certainty where maybe we had a belief that they did at one point. And so how do you operate? I mean, we're kind of in a way, as you know, especially in the US, every single person's operating in that uncertainty just in their life because of all the kind of disruption that's happening and, you know, just the turmoil. So in business, it's just another iteration of that. And I think when we were talking earlier, we were discussing what is one of the critical skills to being able to move through that confidently. And I think we all agree that it's how you think, it's your mindset, and it's your mentality, and it's what you believe, and how you're thinking about your business, you know. And so I think that's the goal, is to kind of talk through some of those skills maybe that at least we've found to be useful in our business, or maybe things that we're struggling with that we haven't figured. You know, obviously there's a ton that I haven't figured out. Brad's got everything figured out, so maybe he can give insight on the rest of it. But yeah, it's the mindset side of how we operate in a completely uncertain environment. And look, let's give us some perspective. Like, there have been worse times in history to be alive. It's still a really great time to be alive. It's still a really exciting time. We still have it so good compared to every generation before us.
Absolutely.
And I think we can lose that perspective. But, you know, relative to our lifetime, it is more uncertain than it has been, or to most people's. And so how do you operate in that and operate successfully and confidently when you know that there's a lot that you can't rely on?
Yes. You know, for me, it's just really being excited about technology moving forward. Like, I find that if I focus too much on the inner workings of my business, as far as technology changes that put stress on our business, or things that don't work as well as they could, we have to put time in that. But that doesn't get me excited. Like, it doesn't get me excited to try to fix inner workings of my business, the inner workings, or to try to work on different platforms that I'm trying to figure out. What really gets me more excited is the external large picture of where technology is moving and how I can introduce that into my business. That might be a year, 2 years down the road. So that's what really keeps me moving, and that's what keeps me learning. And the more I learn about technology, about business, about other types of practices, the more I can help my clients to be more thought forward versus just trying to solve the problem inside my business. You know, we find that, you know, that I like to leave that to somebody else, to my business. It just doesn't get me excited. What gets me excited is to work with clients and try to be thought provoking to them on things that they can do. Even if they can't take advantage of it now, maybe they can take advantage of it a year from now. And that's what really gets me excited. To me, this is just a personal thing. It's innovation. It's our culture that is moving forward. Those kind of things are really exciting for me.
Yeah, me too. I love it. And I think before we start, maybe the first thing we need to talk about before we get into business approaches to future thinking and technology. You know, we've talked about this on the podcast quite a bit. Hopefully not too much, but I don't think you can talk about it too much. Is, as a business owner, and specifically in the agency world, I think it's imperative that we work on ourselves and that we have some level of self-awareness, because without self-awareness, none of this other stuff we're going to talk about today really is going to work. Because self-awareness says, I know my own tendencies, I know my own biases, and I know my personality, and where I have issues that I can improve on, and where I may be wrong, and where I may go astray. And I know my strengths and where I'm really good at something. And that allows me to know where I'm not good at something. So those are all things that I think are super important as leaders, as business owners, et cetera. If we do run a business, and even if we don't, even when you're working with or for someone else, all of these other things, have to build on top of that, because if you don't believe that you can be wrong or that you can be better in the way that you think about things, then you're not going to be open to some of the other more practical, tactical things as well. So, Ken, I know that you spent a lot of time on that.
That's covering your downsides, and it's a when you think of how any team's made up of, or any team is made up, you've got different roles that cover, the things that other people are not good at. So like the roles are complementary. And I think that in a business, it's really important to think about that from a leadership standpoint is, are you, in order to operate really, really well, and I believe now you need to be able to have a future focus, like think about, and, something that in some of my coaching, like lots of my coaches have told me, your business is now and your business is what your business is becoming. Like you're in two different businesses and you have to make sure that you focus on the two different businesses. What are you becoming and what are you now? And sometimes, you might just be really good at the now. You might be someone that loves servicing and executing, that kind of stuff. And I think in agencies, you see a lot of that. And that's a really good thing because that's how you service clients really effectively. But it can end up that you don't focus on the future side of it, which is critical all the time, and especially critical right now. And you mentioned earlier, like, how do you make sure that you stay relevant, in this world where there's trends and there's, obviously technology changes, and I don't actually think age is a factor, but I do think your perception of it is a factor. Anyway, all those things are part of it. And really what you're talking about is how do you stay future focused? And, Bob, that's something that we've talked about a few times. Like you've got like this, you got like a crystal ball of agency technology. You can somehow you can somehow see the future really, really well. At least in my lifetime of knowing you, like that's always been the case. And so, it's been interesting to see some of that come about. And I think that you keep getting older, right? You're not old, by the way, but you keep getting older, right? But you're able to stay relevant because you focus on that. Mm-hmm. And you do a good job of that. And I think that the emphasis has to be put on what is coming next? Like you have to put some thought into that every day almost.
It's interesting because I feel like there's different things that motivate each of us in business and getting to know you guys better. It's like, for me, I don't need to listen to somebody who is, I like practical information. I don't need the cheerleader part of somebody cheering me on as well. I get cheered on by knowledge and information. That's what stimulates me. Where other people, they really need just somebody cheering them on. Like they just need motivational speaking. And some people need both motivational speaking with information that gets them excited and gets them engaged. And so everyone's a little different. I know for me personally, I like motivation, but it doesn't actually motivate me as much as reading something or digesting something or learning something new. That's what motivates me more. But everyone's different. So I think, you have to kind of find out what really motivates you. Like you said, Bob, have the self-awareness for understanding yourself, knowing what excites you in business, knowing what motivates you, which may not be a motivator speaker. It could be other things. And start to put together your little toolkit to know how to get yourself out of a little bit of valleys. So if you go into a valley, what's going to get you out of it? What's going to get you out of the time, to get you motivated, to get you more excited? And what about you guys? What do you guys think about that?
I agree 100%. I saw a funny meme on, I should probably send it to you because you relate to it, a funny meme on the internet where somebody was saying, what do you guys think about this? It was something about, a coach or a business coach coming alongside and saying, you can do it, keep going, don't give up. And the person's like, if someone did this, I would totally stop, quit just to spite them. And the point is, some people really need, that kind of motivation, that type of motivation. And as you said, I think you're demonstrating self-awareness right now. Like that doesn't motivate you. But you do know what motivates you. And so to lack self-awareness would be everybody else is being motivated. Maybe there's something wrong with me. I'm just going to keep going so that maybe it'll stick in one day, until you wake up and say, oh, that's not my personality type. That doesn't work for me. And how many times are people being pressured to do a certain thing or to get motivated or to improve themselves that really don't fit their personality? So I think that's a great point, Brad, that you said, find what works for you and be aware enough to say, there are different things that work for everybody, and I don't have to judge it or use it if it doesn't work for me. If it works for you, great. If not, I'm going to find the thing that does work for me.
I think.
So what are the things that
you're talking about? Values, like what do you value? And I think that I believe,
yes.
And people value different things. I don't know. I know there was just an example, but like, I don't think cheerleading is that effective as a motivator for most people. Like, and I wouldn't say business, any type of coach probably wouldn't necessarily be a cheerleader. In fact, they'd probably be the opposite in some ways. It's not really cheerleading, but go ahead.
Let me give you an example. I know people who are marketing who just love Gary Vee, right? He's, to me, just a cheerleader, right? He's just somebody who's going to be hard on you and get your mind focused. It does work for some people. I get it, but he doesn't do anything for me, right? I need a little bit more substance than what he gives. He just gives a lot of encouragement, right? Or gives you a little smack on the back of the head to get you moving. And some people need that. I mean, and I don't think and maybe that's just one thing in the toolbox of many, many things that people will use, but I think we all do that. We have our 10 things that we go to, and we listen to these thought leaders and other people in industries, and we're trying to absorb information. And a couple, you might need that little hit smack on the back of the head to get moving. I personally, it doesn't really do anything for me. It's entertaining, but it's, and where I might actually read an article in Forbes or something that will give me a lot more information, or I might watch a podcast or listen to Blinkist, which is these small little audio. They take the books and they pare them down to smaller audio bites. So for me, it's always this gathering of information, but my toolbox looks much different than your toolbox, and looks different than Bob's toolbox, I think. Give me an example of some of the things that you go to. Ken.
No, I was curious. Like, I don't agree. The smacky on the back, the pick me up motivational thing, that doesn't work for me either. It has to have substance for me anyway. But I'm curious, do you like listen to podcasts or, read books? Is it more information about the stories of how someone's done something, or information about maybe the science or the facts behind it? Like, what does it for you, Brad?
For me, I try to, I watch financial news, because to me, that's always gives me a good idea of the landscape of business. So that helps me to understand different industries and what's going on, which I think helps me relate to my clients better, because we have a diversified portfolio of clients in different industries, right? So I know what's going on in healthcare. I know what's going on in automotive. I know what's going on in consumer products. I know what's going on in these segments, and it helps me just to kind of keep abreast of all the industries. So that's one thing that I do, and I think that most people should do that. Literally, if you can't, we are financial advisors to our clients, right? They're not coming to us; they're coming to us to make money. I mean, that's really the gist of it, and to sell their products or services, or to market their products better. So I think you have to have a good understanding of the general financial markets, what's going on in the industry. And then secondary, you have to keep yourself abreast in technology. right? What's going on in the future? What's going on with blockchain? What's going on with this? How our industry is going to change in the next couple of years. And then on top of that, you have to be versed in, I think at that point, in people. So like the human side of things. So, trying to listen to podcasts that are about, understanding yourself better, understanding people better. And I think that's what we live in. We live in our industry is so people focused that in the end of the day, we have to influence people. We have to communicate with people. We have to touch people's hearts. We have to tell stories about people and about conditions of the human heart. So I think if you combine all that together in one, to me, that's what I do to keep myself abreast and to be able to at least be able to help my clients.
That's great. And, I'll just jump in here and say, don't want to spend a ton of time on our personality types, but Brad, having known you for a few years, and as you guys know, I've brought this up before. I'm a big fan of the Enneagram, which if anyone's looking for a tool for self-awareness, it's great for that. And I know that you tend to lean toward the number 5 on the Enneagram. That's where you kind of, your energy is. And that number is called the investigator, right? So that when you said, it makes sense that that's what you enjoy doing, is investigating and finding information and applying that information, versus someone giving you something that like is just a small piece of info or a motivator or something like that. You really you'd like to dig into that. So that makes total sense. And again, just kind of coming full circle to this idea of self-awareness. What a great piece and example of being self-aware for you to be able to give the freedom to other people to say, that's great, appreciate it, that's what you need. But I'm also aware that for me, I can make better use of my time and resources by doing what really reaches me. So that's awesome.
Yep.
And I think the point, though, that to take away is I think it's important to be intentional about that stuff and really pursuing it.
Yes.
So whatever it is for you, like you've got to absorb it. It does come down to absorbing information on some level. Because if you just stay within your own box, that's the fastest way to becoming irrelevant, I believe.
Yeah, because I find that if I spend so much time just putting out fires internally and trying to solve these little minor issues internally, which I can in my business, what happens is it's a big sucking sound for me, and then I can't provide I spend all my energy there and not the future. And so for me, I have to be thinking about what's to come. I have to be thinking about the future of my clients. And so it's a balance, right?
How do you balance that practically?
You know what it is that I found that if I just don't care as much, like I have people that can help the internal fires. And sometimes I don't really need to get involved. I just do it because I feel like there's nobody better than me to fix it. But if I just kind of ignore it, it fixes itself. I found that other people will go in there and fix it. And in the end, I didn't really need to be involved. So,
and it's something you don't care, but
no, it's something I don't care.
But you're saying that, like, yeah, the acting like you don't, okay, I'm going to intentionally not step into this. I'm going to let them kind of deal with it.
I have so much energy a day. That's all I have. Yeah, I'm going to either spend it on something that's going to be more valuable or not as valuable. And so sometimes if I get involved internally, I do step in once in a while, but it's only when I'm asked to come in. It's only when someone says, "Hey, I need you to help me with this." And I got to the point where I stepped away from that, and to the point where I let my people say, "Listen, you guys can figure it out. You guys are smart," and they do, and it does resolve itself. And it's amazing because now that's a piece of energy that I don't have to spend. I can spend it on something else.
The other thing that happens with that is, I think when you step into things, you risk becoming a crutch to the people that actually are primarily supposed to deal with that thing.
Yes.
And I just think it's unhealthy overall. you disempower someone in a way when you actually step in and help them, even if they're asking for it. Like sometimes the best thing is to let them figure it out, and it's hard, especially in agencies, to find safe places where people can figure things out and fail possibly and learn. Like that is a challenge. And I've had, but there are certain ways I've tried to do that. But that has to happen. Right. And I think there is a big risk of the opposite. Like this happens with us often is we might get pulled into things. We have a very helpful team. Like everyone wants to they care about how someone else is doing, and they feel bad if someone's like overwhelmed or in a stressful situation. So they'll try and help. But sometimes that's the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
Right. And, and that's hard to discern.
It's hard to create a culture, but Elon Musk said that they asked Elon Musk what would get you fired at Tesla? And he said, you would never get fired by trying something and failing, even if you failed badly. What you get fired for is not innovating, is not pushing yourself. That's what you get fired for. If you become stagnant and don't continue to push yourself. So he tries to create a culture where failure is part of the process. In fact, you watch even not with Tesla, but with SpaceX, they fly these spaceships up and they come back down to land themselves and they blow up and there's $300 million or whatever gone in a second, whatever the cost is of those rockets. It's like that's the failure that's going to make them succeed next time because they learn from that. And so it's having this culture of failure, which is really hard for me. Like when I was younger,
I think it's hard for people in this industry specifically.
I wasn't taught that.
Yes.
I was taught that when you fail, you fail. And
well, agencies typically, there's like, this is part of why we have this podcast. It's like, everyone's like perfect, right? Everyone's got to figure it out. There is no failure. They're absolutely perfect.
Exactly.
And I think it's a challenge.
Well, you're absolutely
yeah, right.
But the rest of us have to fail to learn.
We call him perfect Ken.
Right.
Yeah. So, so I grew up thinking that failure was failure. So it's taken me years to understand that, failure is actually succeeding.
I mean, I know we want to dig into other things, but like, I'm interested to know, it's the fail fast thing, the failure concept has been around, right, for the last several years, and it's kind of trendy. So it's not new to anybody. Okay. Yeah. But like a company like Tesla with, it might be from the outside easy to say, yeah, you've got like, I don't know how many billions of dollars and you can fail and you have your own product. So it might be easier to fail, on a micro level, but how do you fail, or how do you empower your team, or how do you empower yourself to innovate and potentially fail when you're serving clients in this industry where failure sometimes looks like you don't have it figured out and why in the world did we hire you? Right. I think it's a hard concept for clients to understand that there is it's not a guarantee that there's innovation and failure that's possible. How do you guys do that? I feel like that's a difficult thing. And I think it's core to the issue because innovation is critical to staying relevant. And to be innovative, you have to be willing to fail. So failure is a critical thing. And I feel like in agencies, that is a very hard thing to do.
Well, I think first of all, go ahead, Bob.
No, I was just going to say it kind of leads us into the tactical part because it is, it's not when you ask how you stay relevant, how you work with your clients to teach them, I think it's about getting back to the culture and the mindset of what you establish within your agency so that when clients do come to you, they're very aware of who you are, what your brand stands for, and who you are as a person and how you work. Because you're right. I think there's still this mindset that the only reason I'm going to go hire an expert is they're going to solve my problem for me that I don't have the power to do internally. And I think while there's so much truth in that, and we should be able to help solve problems, I think the mindset is we can't do it. We've failed. Let's find someone who can guarantee success and pay them a lot of money to do it. And I think we need to have our eyes wide open walking into those situations And again, not to sound redundant, be self-aware enough to know when you're getting yourself into one of those situations with a client and how to talk and to communicate that effectively. Go ahead, Brad.
Well, I always look at, if you look at like a financial model, like if I'm personally trying to invest in my financial investments, I'm going to do things that are higher risk and lower risk, right? I'm going to put money into things that I know are mainly making 3%, and I'm going to take a little portion of it and actually put it into higher risk investments. And most investment, if you have someone investing in managing your money, they're going to do that too, depending on your age and where you want to go in life. And so it's a plan, right? That's a tracking plan. Like, where do you want to be at this point? Okay, this is how I'm going to manage and divide up your money. It's the same thing with clients, right? You got to find out where they want to go, and they say, well, to go here, we're going to have to put 20% in a higher risk area. We're going to have to push the boundaries and take a little bit more risk with that. And if you paint the picture in a financial model, typically they go, yeah, that's great. And so you'll know, like, hey, 80% of what we're doing, we've done 100 times. We know what the results are going to be. But this other little percent, we're going to actually kind of take some risk and try some new things and see if it actually gets results. And so I think if you look at it that way and you talk in that language, most clients will understand that. They'll understand, hey, to get from A to B, you're going to have to take a little bit of risk. Also, it's easier to take a little bit of risk on yourself. So if you're doing something new in your business, maybe practice on yourself. We've talked about that in the past. Like, maybe run a campaign for your own business that you're taking that risk and you're actually getting results. So then you can actually show results to your clients of what it did for you or for another client. So there's a lot of ways, I think, to sell something that is very progressive but isn't proven, 100% proven yet. And I think it's really it's the overall strategy.
Let me tell you guys a story. Let me tell you guys a story which I read recently. It's pretty interesting, but it'll set the table for maybe the next part of this discussion. Back in the early 80s, there was a Soviet sub that grounded itself on Swedish shores. And the Swedes and the Swedish army came out, and all of a sudden there was this huge atomic submarine that they had been trying to find or to know about during the Cold War. The Black Sea between those countries and Russia wasn't very far, but they knew that Soviet Russia at the time was up to some supposedly nefarious things going on, and all of a sudden there's this giant nuclear sub that comes up out of the water. And what they found, they talked to the captain of the Russian sub, and he said, "Look, I'm sorry, this was really a mistake. We got off course with our technology." And of course, the Swedes thought, "Okay, we're about to be at war with Russia," and make a long story short, they got the sub back. They kind of worked it out. But what everyone was asking was, why did the Swedish military intelligence, not know that this sub was in their waters or hear it? Had they not been studying sonar signals and, again, intelligence? How did this happen? And so about 10 to 15 years later, this supposedly highly secret sound that was the sonar sound of a Russian nuclear sub that they kept under wraps for, all during the Cold War. And no one knew what this sound was. There was the movie sounds of, the underwater sub, and everyone thought it was that. And when they finally released it, it sounded nothing like that. And so they released it about 10 or 15 years later. And it sounded, you can go online and probably find it, but it sounds like just little micro bubbles. It sounds like it's just a weird sound. It sounds nothing like a submarine. And so these two scientists in I think it's the late 90s, maybe early 2000s, said, wait a second, we're going to study this. Something sounds off. Make a long story short, get to the end of the story. What they found was what the Swedish intelligence was listening to all these years, and how they missed the sub was the sound of red herring, schools of red herring fish. Red herring fish are one of the only fish that they let out these bubbles in their, what they call their air sac that fish have to keep them floating around. And when they gather in schools,
Very
hundreds
technical.
or thousands of them, they let out these what are like fish farts, basically. And what these Swedish intelligence scientists, whatever, had been studying for years and years, what they thought was Russian subs was actually they were listening to schools of red herring fish. And that was how this Russian sub landed on Swedish shores. Now, why do I say that? It's because we have this thing in our business called best practices, right? And we latch on to best practices and then we lock it down. It freezes in time. And then we say, this is the way you do something. And kind of like the military intelligence in Sweden, they said, okay, somebody somewhere said, this is a Russian sub. They locked it down, put it under highly secret. No one had it, but a few intelligence officers. And they said, this is the Russian sub. Well, what can happen over time is we find ourselves, like that Russian nuclear sub will wash up on our shores, metaphorically. And we're like, how did that happen? How did our business go under? How did we lose all this? How did we? And I think there's a danger in that type of thinking in our business as agencies where we latch on to, and we've said this before, this is a best practice. Be willing to always challenge best practices in your own business, in the world. Like you said about Elon Musk, Brad, I think he's a rare, and Steve Jobs, others, there's every once in a while, there's rare people who rise up and challenge and say, I know the world is doing this a certain way, and we've said this is the best way, but how can we do it better and innovate? And I think on a micro level, to answer your question, Brad, is how do we stay, how do we offer to our clients something that's more than just tactics? Is that we're always willing to say, we will follow best practices, but best practices are not best practices. They are good, they work, and they might work for, the next 5 years, but always be willing to say, how do we say this may not be the best? How do we avoid the Swedish Army mistake of saying, this is the sound of a sub and we're going to lock it down and not let anyone else know about it, and that's all we're going to study. The same thing is we have a tendency, Ken, you talk about this a lot, is like secrecy amongst agencies. Like, I'm going to keep all my practices secret. And, we've got a magic way of doing things. We've learned how to hack Facebook.
It's practices like that. They should keep them secret.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep them
so anyway,
yourself.
I don't know what you guys think about that, but I think that's one way, that one practical way is be willing to challenge best practices.
No, I mean, I think that, go ahead, Brett. I was going to say, challenging beliefs is a critical thing in staying relevant. I think that it's hard to do.
It is hard. It's hard to do sometimes in an agency because of the culture. Like, you build a culture and you build processes, and most people, what I found in business is most people need a strong process. They just want to go in and know that they're doing a good job and they're doing it right and correct. And sometimes you should teach that, but at the same time, how do you teach a culture that is saying, do it this way all the time, because these processes work and we're one big engine and everyone has to do their process. Otherwise the whole engine doesn't work. But at the same time, think out of the box and always challenge that process. There is a little bit of speaking out of both sides of your mouth when you say that. So it's a concept that, yes, do your job well and do the process, but look at ways that you can innovate to make that process better and think out of the box to make it better. Because and start to talk to your employees and people that you work with in that kind of fashion. Like, hey, we're there to do this process, and don't change from the process. Don't go rogue and do something different, but look at ways that maybe this process you could do it better, or new ways to do this process that would make things more efficient. And have that dialogue with your employees, and that give them that freedom to be able to do that.
And one critical thing is, is sharing, being open and having a peer group, where you talk about this stuff. I think that's lacking in this industry. Most industries have this kind of peer groups, but I think in the agency world, it's changing a little bit. A few months ago, we had John Sirakis on, who runs a mastermind for agencies, and I'm part of that, and it's actually really good. And it's nice to see that. I'm personally part of other masterminds in the e-commerce industry for that, and it is such a refreshing thing when you enter into a room with people who are doing something at a high level and are willing to share everything, can literally open up. You can see entirely behind the curtain, and there's a respect and a trust that's already established that, you're not going to hurt me by this information. It's going to be a two-way street. So we're going to both help each other. But when that's established, you get to see things, you get to see other ways, right? You get to see things that maybe you didn't believe to be true, that now someone else is showing that it is true. And you learn so much faster. And I think that's one easy way of doing it, right? Is just not staying closed inside of yourself and just focused on the way you do things. And I don't know, Brad, or Bobby, if you agree with this, but it does feel like, is there a reverence around the way we've always done stuff that is sometimes just apparent in the agency world, right? There's this this almost sacredness to certain things. There's one business that I follow closely, and the founder always says that there's no sacred cows in this business. I don't know exactly where that comes from, but what he's saying is you can challenge anything. There's a culture of, just because I say it, you shouldn't just take it as true just because I'm the founder. And it's a pretty big organization, which I think happens sometimes too. And so I think you have to be intentional about the opposite way, because I think that there's a tendency to have just reverence around the way we've done things all the time.
Here's what I think failure. Regarding what you just mentioned is there's two different things that we sell in our business. We sell a commodity, which is easy to sell because the client already knows that language and already wants that thing. And now it's just based on price. And then we sell this thing, it's called innovation or new way of doing things. And that's a harder sell to our clients because you have to get them bought into it. They may have never done it before. It's a higher risk and they don't even know what you're talking about half the time because it's maybe it's a little bit, progressive. And so that's a harder sell. It's easier to sell a commodity because the client's asking for it. They just want the best price for it. And this for your part. So if your business is more the right punch, right? Yes, you might be able to take a client further, but it's just a lot more work to sell them for the most part. And you have to have the right client. Some clients, you can't get them easily on board with this right punch. You've got to sell them, this, which is what they're asking for. And so we sometimes tend to live in this world because it's easy. We talk the same language as our customer. The customer is actually asking for that, but it becomes very commoditized. Where this is what I think all agencies really want to do this, but it's a harder sell. And I think that's the challenge is how do you get the clients on board with the right punch, the innovation, the progressiveness, and how do you then this looks a lot less valuable, the commodity business. And I think for me, that's kind of like the fine line of always, doing this for our clients, like a little bit of this is what you're asking for. And this is what gets us in the door and starts the conversation. But we try to bring in the right punch to say, let's add a little bit of this in there too. I mean, if you were in a boxing match and always doing this, you're never gonna, you need your right hand to come up.
You need that right hook.
Yeah, you need the right hook. And so, but it's really about sales and about being able to communicate that to your customers so they understand the values of it. And knowing that it takes a little bit of both.
Yeah, to get back to your question, Ken, and I think it relates to what Brad just said. I keep beating this drum. It's about creating a culture of that internally. And I found, and I think you could probably go back to history and see it over and over again, is that the innovations and the creativity don't come from the people at the top. It comes from the people that are in the trenches. If you look at all the great inventors over history, and I'm just blown away. February is Black History Month, and I'm learning so much from my Black friends who said, "Did you know that this person invented this? This person invented this?" And the things that are so every day, that are so practical, we take for granted, many times aren't invented by the great inventors or the people at the top. They're really invented by people that are tinkering in their bathrooms or in their kitchens with some, mixing something up, or somebody just had this idea. And I think creating that culture in your agency where you encourage everyone, not just the leaders, not just the communicators, not just the quote higher level people, but the new hires, the young people, the administrators, wherever you are in the organization, encourage and create a culture of thinking outside the box, of thinking like a scientist, like we said in the last episode, of saying, I'm willing to test this. And I think the other question was, how do you hold both things? How do you hold good processes and at the same time say, we could do it better? To me, the word evolution or evolve, to be able to say, this is where we are now, and this is the best process, but we are evolving and it will evolve. And just set that expectation to say, this process is a really good process and it's worked the past year for us. It's worked in other agencies, but it is an evolving and changing fluid document process, whatever it may be. And just let people know that if you have a better way of doing it, to bring it to the table. They won't be criticized. They won't be shot down. And then demonstrate that as a leader. So I think you can hold both of those things. And another tip that I would say is, maybe it's a quarterly revisiting or every 6 month revisiting of all your processes inside your agency, where the whole team sits down and says, okay, everyone's in the room. This is how we do this. This is how we do our whatever. This is the process we use. Does everybody agree? Has it been working? Is there a better way? Have you seen other ways to do it? Let's pick it apart. What are the weaknesses? Why is this not the best way? What is the thing that you don't like about it? And how can we change it? I think getting in the habit of doing those things, because it's easy to put something on the shelf and forget about it for a few years. But those are the things that can come back and bite you if you're not careful.
As you were talking about the inventions and where they come from, I think, we all know that innovation, like true innovation, a lot of times those breakthroughs come from needing to be resourceful, right? You have a problem, and so you have no other choice. You've got to change that somehow. And there's this concept. We've all heard the concept of burn the ships, right? Like there's this idea that when you don't have another way, another option, like you will figure it out. And I know that in my experience in business, I've my entire life been in business for myself, or owned business and that kind of thing. And I know even with our current business, the some of the most challenging times from a revenue standpoint, like we're in a lull or something's not right, those are the times that and while I'm in them, I've learned I'm not really inherently thinking this, but I've been taught and I've learned to say, okay, what is the good in this? Like, how can I really enjoy this and make this the best? And really the way is, for me, it's been, okay, great. This is a blessing. Like we've got a challenge here, whatever, for some reason, we're not selling the way we were before, or something just isn't, people aren't buying. So that means we have a problem. Like, so how do we innovate? How do we fix that so that we can come out even better, rather than just trying to do the same things over and over again? However it happens, I think that resourcefulness comes from problems. And so So what would be great is if you didn't have to be in the situation where you have a critical problem to become resourceful. If you just, I try and create those scenarios, hypothetically, even like think through them and like put real effort into solving a problem without you having a critical life threatening problem in front of you. And I think when it comes to innovation and where our businesses are going, I think you really need to think about that. What if this was taken away? What if this, and we talked about that last week, but that's where that resourcefulness comes from, I believe. And that's where inventions come from, is when there's a problem and you have to be resourceful. You have no other way. So how do you create those situations? I think if we're always thinking that we've got it figured out, or we're always telling ourselves, because we're supposed to be the ones that have it figured out. And so if you drink your own Kool-Aid too much, or you're too arrogant, you're never going to innovate. You're not going to be doing those things. And that's maybe one of the bigger risks.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I think it's all about, with your clients, forming trust. And if you can form trust on the small things, and you give them a good return on investment, then you can start to slowly start to discuss things with them that are a little bit more out of the box. And once you build that trust, because you never build that trust, you're never going to sell them on the future, right? Because it's going to seem scary. But if they trust you, you've done well for them on the little things, they're going to give you more opportunity. And I've seen that throughout my whole career. And it's different with every client. Every client you have to know them well. It's a relationship, and you have to understand their risk, how much they can take a risk, or what their risk level is. And so you have to get to know them like a regular person and know, okay, now I can start to give you some more suggestions that maybe might be a little bit more progressive and more out of the box thinking.
Yeah, that's really good. As we wind down, there's a couple of things I've mentioned. Adam Grant's book, Think Again, to you guys. I've really been enjoying it. I would advise it. At the end of his book, he has some actions. He calls them actions for impact. I want to read a few of them, because I think they tie into everything we talked about today. And the first thing is individual rethinking, and then we'll get into a couple others. But develop the habit of thinking again. And the first thing he says is, as we've said, think like a scientist. When you start forming an opinion, resist the temptation to preach, prosecute, or politic. Treat your emerging view as a hunch or a hypothesis, and test it with data. Like the entrepreneurs who learn to approach their business strategies as experiments, you'll maintain the agility to pivot. Number 2, define your identity in terms of values, not opinions. It's easier to avoid getting stuck to your past beliefs if you don't become attached to them as part of your present self-concept. See yourself as someone who values curiosity, learning, mental flexibility, and searching for knowledge. As you form opinions, keep a list of factors that would change your mind. Number 3, seek out information that goes against your views. You can fight confirmation bias, burst filter bubbles, and escape echo chambers by actively engaging with ideas that challenge your assumptions. An easy place to start is to follow people who make you think, even if you usually disagree with what they think. Number 4, beware of getting stranded at the summit of Mount Stupid. Don't confuse confidence with competence. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a good reminder that the better you think you are, the greater the risk you are overestimating yourself, and the greater the odds that you'll stop improving. To prevent overconfidence in your knowledge, reflect on how well you can explain a given subject. Number 5, harness the benefits of doubt. I love this one. When you find yourself doubting your ability, reframe the situation as an opportunity for growth. You can have confidence in your capacity to learn while questioning your current situation. Your current solution to a problem. Knowing that you don't know is often the first step toward developing expertise. And the last one is embrace the joy of being wrong. When you find out you've made a mistake, take it as a sign that you've just discovered something new. Don't be afraid to laugh at yourself. It helps you focus less on proving yourself and more on improving yourself. And he's got a bunch of others for other things, but I thought those were good practical tools for making an impact, not only in your personal life, but in your business life too.
That's good.
You know, as you're reading that, I just hear humility over and over again. And I think that it's hard, you know, or it can be hard depending on your personality type, but that ability to be confidently humble and not arrogant is maybe one of the most critical factors in being able to do innovation and to move forward confidently and all those kind of things.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, gentlemen, it's been a good discussion. Love these talks. Looking forward to seeing you in person, hopefully the next recording.
Yes. Virtual high fives.
Virtual high fives, but go to our new YouTube channel. Listeners.
Yeah, we launched it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Go to Agency, just search Agency Exposed Podcast. Please check it out. Subscribe. Follow us on Apple Podcast, on Spotify Podcast, and rate and review. We'd love to get some more input.
Awesome.
All right, guys.
As always. Bye.
Bye.
All right, guys. Bye.